Hello everyone, Ben here with a solo game of Mottainai. This is going to be a solo variant up on Board Game Geek, so I'll put a link in the description, and if you're interested you can check it out. It's set up exactly as a two-player game. You've got your area and your hand of 5 cards, and then your opponent, who is the Acolyte, has their area and their hand of 5 cards. In the normal game, then every player would flip up one card from the deck, and then in alphabetical order, depending on what you flipped up, that would then determine player order. However, in the solo variant, you get to go first anyway, so these 2 cards have just been placed up, and then that starts the floor area for the game. I will say that Mottainai is quite a in-depth game to get your head round at the start of it. There's a lot of things to keep track of, and at least if you're a beginner in the game, it all kind of seems a bit out of your depth maybe. So one thing I would suggest is if you use these handy turn reference cards that come with the game, and you basically follow it religiously, muddling through as best you can, but follow the turn reference cards, you pretty much can't go wrong, and then once a couple of turns are in and things start to click and flow together, you'll get the hang of how it plays. So things may not make much sense as I'm going through at the beginning, but it should hopefully begin to make more sense as we get through towards the end of the game anyway. So to begin with, we have the morning phase, and we return our cards down to a hand limit of 5. Well, we get to start with 5 cards dealt to us, so we don't have to bother with that. We place our previous task on the floor, so cards up here are your tasks, and at the beginning of the game you get basically a placeholder one face down in that area, so we'll just flip that up and place it back onto the floor. Then we get to perform in the morning effects on any of our works, and we haven't actually built anything yet, so we don't have to bother with in the morning effects. And then we get to choose a new task from our hand, and this is where the analysis paralysis starts to kick in, as you have to pick which task you want and try and combo with your opponent's tasks, and all sorts of shenanigans ensue. Basically, we have clerks, tailors, and monks to start with, so we can either do a clerk action, a tailor action, or a monk action. Every action, no matter which one you pick, can always do a prey as a default, and that simply means you take a card from the card deck and you place it into a waiting area, and then that fills up your hand at the end of your turn. We're probably not going to bother doing that to start with, so we want to be doing, well, let's see, crafting with paper is probably a good start since we have a couple of paper items. Not going to craft with cloth or stone, and not going to refill because we're at the top, and hire a helper. Maybe in the future we'll hire the helper, or a helper. But I think to start with we'll do the clerk action, and we can craft with paper to get us going. So we've got the straw we could craft. Smith actions we require 1 to support. That seems pretty handy. Or we've got the curtain we could craft. I'm not that fussed about the Acolyte skipping my tasks, so I think we'll go with the straw. So this is the item we're going to try and craft and get into our area, and in order to craft this particular paper item we need to use a clerk action. So on every card you've got a nebulous item of some kind, and you've got a person, and there are going to be 5 in the game, so there are clerks, monks, tailors, potters and smiths, and then they are paired up with a material, and it's always the same. So clerks are always paired up with paper, monks are always paired up with stone, and so on and so forth. And the particular person can only craft their particular material. So clerks can only craft paper, which they're paired up with, monks can only craft stone, which they're paired up with, so on and so forth. So if we want to craft this paper item, we have to put a clerk task under our task area, and then we can craft with paper. So we'll do that, and we'll see how that goes. So then we are into the noon part of our turn, and we can perform each opponent's task, and this is where all the combos and stuff starts to kick in. But at least for the start, we don't actually have any opponent tasks to combo off, unfortunately. We have our Acolyte, who is our only opponent, and his task is a placeholder face-down task, so we can't actually do anything with it. So we'll skip him for the time being, and then we'll come round to us and we'll perform our task, which, as I said before, is going to be crafting with paper. So we have an item, and each item has a value at the bottom right here. And again, this is the same throughout the deck. So paper is always 1, stone and cloth are always 2, and clay and metal is always 3. This is not only points at the end of the game, which is handy, but it's also a crafting cost, as it were. So when you craft this item, which we're going to do now, the item itself supplies some of the material for it. So this straw supplies 1 paper, and fortunately that's all we need, because it's the value 1 here. We only need 1 to complete this 1 paper item, so we can craft it straight out. If we were trying to craft this stone fountain, for example, it's a crafting value of 2, so the stone fountain would add 1 to the crafting value, and then we would need 1 more in order to bring it up to 2, and that would come from our craft bench where we could put some more stone. So each item supplies in itself 1 for the purposes of crafting, and then you need to supplement this with additional materials if you're crafting items with higher values. So for example, if you were crafting a metal item, that would be 1, and then you'd need 2 more metal in your craft bench to bring it up to the total of 3 for the metal item. This will hopefully become clearer as we go along. But for the time being, paper is very useful because paper can basically craft itself. It supplies all the materials it's needed for itself for the value of 1, so we can just craft this paper straw and place it. We have 2 options here. We can place it on the right in our gift shop. We can place it on the left in our gallery. I think probably in our gallery may be a slightly better option, and we'll see how that plays out later on. But yeah, we'll place it there, and the differences between the 2 areas will become apparent later on. But for the time being, we'll place it into our gallery, like so. And then we have an item we can make use of later on whenever the text specifies, basically. So that's fine. See you in a second. Good, so we did our task, which is a craft. We didn't do no tasks, so we didn't do a pray, but that's fine. Then we come to night, and we perform at-night effects on our cards. We don't have any of those, that's fine. And then any cards that were in our waiting area as a result of praying or maybe refilling your hand with a tailor, you can get them to place into your hand, and that's the way you get cards back into your hand, basically. But there is that delay of having to get them into the waiting area first before you can then make use of them. But that is fine. Then we come to the Acolyte, and the Acolyte is fairly similar in the beginning. It flips its task face up into the floor, and then rather than taking one from its hand, it will take a task from the deck, and you simply get the first one at the top of the deck and then just place it like so. And then again it goes through with doing opponent tasks first before doing its own task. So it can do a clerk task. And these are slightly different than the normal tasks in the game, although they follow a similar guideline. Basically, when it tries to do a clerk or a monk task, it takes cards from its hand and places them either in sales or helpers. If it tries to do a potter or a smith task, it takes cards from its hand and then completes them as works and places them out in the gift shop or out in the gallery. And if it tries to do a tailor, it just puts cards in the waiting area. So slightly different than normal tasks, but they do follow similar guidelines to the tasks that are already in the game. So we can do a clerk task, so it will take a card from its hand and it will place it into the sales area as a material. And it will probably do a clay one then. So basically, when it places cards into sales, it wants to try and do covered works first to get maximum points. It will not overcover though, so you have to take that into account. And then if all things being equal, it doesn't have any preference, it will then try and do the most valuable one it can do, which in this case is the clay at 3. And then if there's a tie, which there is between the two clays, it takes its current task item, which is the sword, and then goes alphabetically from that. So that'll be the vase then, carrying on from that, and that will then slide under into the sails, like so. So plot task completed. Then it will try and do a smith task, and this is taking items from its hand and completing them into the gift shop area. So it follows similar rules to a normal smith task, which is not only crafting with metal, as we showed previously with the clerk, but it can complete any work. Now, this sounds similar, but there is a distinct difference. When you craft a material, you have to, apart from the case of paper, you have to supplement it with materials in a crafting bench to bring that value up to the value on the material crafting. If you complete works with a smith, so it's completing a work this time, you take a card from your hand as usual, but you have to supplement it with other materials in your hand. So it doesn't matter how much stuff you've got in your craft bench, if you're completing a work with a smith, you have to show materials from your hand, again up to the value that the crafted material determines. So for example, if it was trying to complete this cloth puppet, the item would count 1 in itself, and then you would need another cloth in your hand to bring that up to the value of 2 to get that cloth puppet completed. Well, it can't do the cloth puppet because it doesn't have any more cloth. It can't do the clay dice because it doesn't have any more clay. It can complete one of these paperworks because they just count for themselves. So it can do a doll or a deck of cards, and again, all things being equal, it will do alphabetical preference. So from sword, we hit deck of cards first, going around the alphabet. So this then gets completed from its hand, and it will go into sales area. And then this is a completed work. Doesn't matter what the item is, the Acolyte does not care for the item on the card. It doesn't take into account any text works, but it simply is now a 1-point item that it scores at the end of the game, and it may cover works that are then in the sales. So that is fine. And then it has no cards that it needs to take from its waiting area into its hand, so we can skip that bit out and back round to us. So then, we don't have over 5 cards, so we're fine there. We can flip our previous task into the floor, and we can select a new one. So, might be worth refilling our hand and getting some more cards up. Especially, we could probably use a potter to get some items into our craft bench. It's basically going to be either a tailor or a monk for hiring with a helper. I don't think we're in need of helpers just yet. No. Although, we do get to complete any work with a smith here as part of the opponent's action. So we could actually complete one of these cloth works. Okay, saying that, maybe we'll use the monk instead as our task. So, fine. Alright, so we'll put the monk in at our task. We then get to do opponent's task first, and we'll pretty much do exactly what the AI did, or the Acolyte, with the smith task. We will complete any work. We can complete one of these 2 cloth works. I'll just bring them down to show them slightly easier. So, no matter which one we pick, we can then use the other one as supplementing it for the purposes of materials. So we can either complete the cloak or the umbrella. In the morning, add a card from the top of the deck to the floor. If you do, you may convert a matching helper into a sail. Not that fussed. After you complete a work, you may return it. If you do, complete a metalwork from your hand for free. That sounds pretty handy, so we'll try that one. So basically, we're going to complete this work from our hand. It's a cloth, so it needs 2. The cloak counts for 1, and then this other cloth here counts for a second, and all we have to do is show it from our hand to our opponents, say we have the extra cloth, and that is a total of 2. So then we can complete this, and again, it can either go to the right or to the left, either way. And I think this time we'll put it into our gift shop and maybe get some cloth sales we can then cover later on for endgame points. Excuse me a second. When putting items into either side, one thing to note is that once there are 5 items in any given side of a player's area, that ends the game immediately. So if you're trying to go for a short game, you basically clump up all items into one area. If you're going for a longer game, you may spread them out between the 2 areas. And also, if the deck of cards runs out at any point when you refill the floor, then that signifies the end of the game as well. But for the time being, we're well off either of those restrictions, so that's okay. So we did the opponent's smith, complete any work, which is great. We got our cloth cloak out. Now we can come on to our task, which is monk. So we can craft with stone. Well, we don't have any stone items, we don't have any stone in our craft bench, so that's null and void. We could pray and just get 1 card into our waiting area, or we could hire a helper. And I think what we're going to do is we're definitely going to hire a helper, and given that we probably want to get a fair amount of stuff into sales, I think we'll get a clerk helper. And, well, what do we have? So we have some monk helpers, we have tailor helpers, and we have clerk helpers. Tailor's refilling hand, but you don't really want too many of those because once you fill up to 5, that's it anyway. Monk is hiring even more helpers or crafting with stone. No, I think a clerk helper is the way to go. It doesn't matter what the item is once it's on the floor. Basically, once the card has been placed onto the floor, you can ignore the item in its entirety and simply focus on what the helper is on the left-hand side or what the material is on the card. So it doesn't matter that it's a curtain or a lampshade, it simply is clerk and paper. So whichever one of these we pick doesn't matter, we just get the clerk like so. And that's fine. So that is our helper there, into our helpers area. And, oh, actually, it is now coloured, so we actually get 2 clerk bonus actions. So that's good. Right. And then we're done, and we probably definitely want to do refilling hand with a tailor action next turn to get more cards in, because we're down to 1 card now, basically. So we're done. Over to the AI. And it flips a task up, it gets a new task out. It is... okay, so it can't unfortunately double up tasks. So when you play the game normally, even if everyone else before you is doing a monk task and you do 5 monk tasks in a row, you can still do one yourself. Unfortunately, the AI, or fortunately depending on how you may see it, doesn't double up tasks. So it will do your task normally, and then when it comes to its task, if it's a duplicate, it will just pray. So monk is taking a material from its hand and placing it into the helper's area this time. So again, there's nothing there already, so it's not covering anything. It's not over covering, so that's fine. So it simply will go for the highest one, and it's going to be the clay dice, like so. And that will just... we'll do this around to make it slightly better. So that will be a clay item there. So again, as well as not taking into account items text, so text on the items for purposes of using it for actions and the like, it does not also take into account helpers. So these are simply similar to sales, just on the other side for the Acolyte. So we simply flip it around as a clay item then, and it's worth, if it's covered, 3 points in the game. Then it comes to its task, and it's a duplicate, so it simply prays and takes a card into its hand. And then it's all done with actions, so this card then flips over to its hand from the waiting area. And that's done. So back to us, and that goes out. The floor is filling up quite full, so we might need to try and get some of these into the craft bench at some point. And then we have only 1 card left, so we'll put a tailor in, and that will be our new action. Then we'll do the Acolyte's monk first, so we could hire a helper. Yes. There's no point praying with tasks if at any point you're then going to do a tailor, because the tailor gets I would say weaker, but it's a wasted action basically with the tailor if you pray beforehand as such, because you're not getting the full use out of it. I'll show why in a second. But so hiring a helper with a monk, we could get another clerk helper, but that's a bit of a waste, I think. Ideally, we'd probably want a potter, but there aren't any out. So we'll go for the smith, and we'll get a smith helper there, and maybe we'll have a string of completing works we can combo together, but we'll see. So that's done with the monk's task, and then we come to tailor. And tailor is basically you take all the cards in your hand that are left over, you take any cards that are in your waiting area, and you tally them together, and then you refill back up to 5, taking into account that total previously. So we don't have any cards in our waiting area, we don't have any cards in our hand, so our total at the moment is 0. So we can get 5 cards from the deck, and we place them all into our waiting area up to the total of 5. So that's why I was saying if we had prayed previously, then we'd still only bring it up to 5, so the tailor task would then only allow us to bring out 4 cards, so it'd be a bit of a waste. So that's fine. But subsequently, if we pray after doing a tailor action, we can always add 1 more card to our waiting area, no matter what, if it's a pray. So that's fine. So we'll do that, and then we're done with tasks, so this can then go into our hand and is our new hand of 5 cards, and that is fine. There's a bunch of paper there, so we might be able to get some completes going. That's pretty good. Right, so back over to the Acolyte, who is going to be doing... oh, well, no, okay, that's fine. So it's going to do a clerk, so first of all it will do a tailor, and in the case of a tailor it simply takes 2 cards into the waiting area, and then it will do a clerk, and it will take a card from the craft bench. Sorry, it will take a card from its hand and place it into the sails. Now it does have a preference this time because it has a paper card that it's already completed. So it wants to get cards into sails that it can then cover, and that's bonus points at the end of the game. So it will take this paper and slide it under, so now that is a covered sail, and that is more points. It won't do it again until it's got some more paper out, because then it'll be over covering and it would get no points. I'll explain covering now because this is a pertinent time for it. Basically that means that, similar to the value on the card, any work that you have on your right hand side or your left hand side can cover that many cards that are in sails or helpers. So a paper item can only cover 1 card. If it was a cloth item, it could cover 2 cards. If they're on the sails side, if it's covering cards that are on the sails, that is then points at the end of the game. So when we tally up endgame scoring, this paper is going to give us 1 point, and then covered paper sails will also give us an additional point. If we had a clay item out, that would be 3 points, and then this covered clay sail would be an extra 3 points. However, if you overcover, as in if you have more cards in your sails that are covered by completed works that are out in the area here, you get no points for any of them whatsoever, except the items themselves. So for example, if we had a second paper in the sails here, at the end game scoring, this paper item would get 1 point. These 2 paper would, however, be overcovering, and it wouldn't get any points whatsoever. You wouldn't get this one missed off and just the point for this one because of the cover. It would exceed the cover ability, and you would get no points for any of your paper sails at all. So in this case, you'd have to have a second paper item to cover 2 paper sails. Hopefully that made sense. In the case of helpers, so for the Acolyte, it treats the gallery here and items here exactly the same as on this side. It's simply reverse on the left hand side here. However, for yourselves, when you come to do tasks, if you have duplicate people on your helpers here, you can then do a double task. So we'll come to that very soon actually. The Acolyte's turn is over. We go into our turn, we're going to flip that onto the floor, and then we're going to put out not the gong. I have a plan for that, so probably one of these clerk tasks, and we'll pick not that. I think we'll try and do the pinwheel, so we'll give up the sketch in order to do so, like so. And now this is where our comboing helpers comes along, because when we come to do opponent's tasks, we see that the opponent Acolyte has a clerk task, so we can do a clerk task. But we have a clerk in our helpers, so we can do a second clerk task, and it's a covered clerk helper with the covering power of 1 of the straw here, so we can do 3 clerk tasks. And this is great. This is where all sorts of comboing actions click together, and it's brilliant. So we can do 1 clerk, which is sell a material, craft with paper. We don't have any material to sell. We could craft with paper, which I think we're going to do. We're going to craft this plain, I think, like so. Yep. Oh, that's what it was. It's not crafting, it's completing. Okay, well, we'll hold on for that for the time being. So that's fine. So we'll craft with paper. We've crafted this plane, and we don't have to support it with anything on our craft bench. It's in itself, so that's fine. Now we can do a second clerk task, and again we could craft with paper, so we can craft this pinwheel, which is fine. We'll do that. And then we can do a third clerk task, and we can't craft with paper because we have no paper, but we can pray basically as a default, so we'll pray like so and get a card into our waiting area, which is fine. We'll do that. Then we come to our clerk task, which we placed out, and we do the whole combo again. We do our task, which is now supported by this helper, which is covered by this straw, so that's 3 in total. So we'll do 3 more clerk tasks, and I think they're probably all going to be praise, basically. So 1, 2, 3. And great. This works for any kind of material, and it's not, apart from the covering, it's not based upon the number on the material. So I know I said that when you combo together, if you've got a clerk helper, you get to do 1 more clerk task, as it were. That's not because the value of the card is 1, that's simply because you have 1 clerk helper there. So for example, if this opponent task here had been a smith, and we were doing smith actions, you would do 1 for your opponent, and then you have a smith helper here, and you would still only do 1 extra smith action. You wouldn't do 3 because the value of the card is 3. That's not how it goes together. So you would still just do the 1 extra smith action. And covering works exactly the same on the left-hand side as it does the right, only instead of points, it's helpers. So basically, with the points, as long as they're covered up to the values, that's fine. If you overcover, you don't get any points for the sales. Similarly, as long as they're covered up to the value on the card for helpers, you can combo together actions. That's great. If, however, it's overextending and you've got too many helpers here that are not significantly covered, you don't get the covering bonus. So you would still get the initial helper action as long as there's a previous task to go off, but you would not get another bonus task for the cover if you're overextended. So that's how that works. And we're all done with actions, so we get our 4 cards now into our hand. Just a second. Nope, we do have an at-night effect, so we may return a card from our hand. If we do, we draw a card to our waiting area. So I think the gong's going to stick around. Do we want to keep the teapot? For the most frequent material type in your craft bench, 3 points for each material. It would be nice to get this out, but I don't think we're going to be able to get it out because we're not doing much with clay at the moment. We have an ability to get metalworks out, which is why the gong's sticking around, but as for clay, I think we'll just put this one back and we'll just get another card into a waiting area. So anytime you return a card, it simply goes to the bottom of the deck like so, and then we can now draw another card into a waiting area. Yep, and then we get to flip all of these into our hand. So we are unfortunately going to have to discard one card at the beginning of next turn to bring us down to 5, but that gives us more options to play through, and you can then pick which one you don't like the look of after that. So fine. Acolyte task out, Acolyte task in. So it will certainly do a monk action, that's fine. So Clark first, and it's going to take something from its hand into sales. It has no preference now because there's no paper, and it won't overcover even if it was. So it then goes in preferential order, and we've got metals and clays, and they're both worth 3. So alphabetical from statue would be the ring. No, that's not right. It would be background, RST, so we're looking for the jar then, all the way around. So this goes underneath and needs yet another clay sale. So if the Acolyte ever gets a clay item into its completed area, it's going to be laughing, because it's got 6 points there straight up. Then it does a monk, and this is exactly the same, only now it comes from its hand into the helpers. So it's going to be the pin, and that will go other way around. So there we go, like so. Okay, back to us, and Clark is out. Now we know we're going to get to do a monk action, so we can hire a helper or craft with stone. Well, we're not seeing any potters, so I think we'll try and get that. Yeah, we'll get the potter in. Although, if we get a smith action going, we could do completed works. Well, either way we have to discard down to 5. We should have done that before we flip the task up, but so which one do we want to get rid of? Probably maybe this tailor here. Don't think we're going to be doing much in the way of cloth. So yeah, we'll get rid of that. So that needs to be returned, not to the floor. So that can just go on the bottom there. So now we have our hand of 5, previous task out, next task in. And I think we'll start completing now. I did say potter to get some materials into our craft bench, but I think we can probably circumvent that with this cloth cloak, which allows us to complete stuff straight away from our hand. So if we put in, which one of these metal items would we like to actually get out? Draw. No, not that one, because that gives up the gong. For a monk, or I think the flute is probably the least preferable of all those for the time being. So we'll put that out, and then unfortunately that means the flute is lost to us for the rest of the game, but so it'll be. So then we come to doing tasks, and we have the monk hiring a helper, and so we've got some clerk helpers, we've got some monk helpers, and we've got some tailor helpers. So I think maybe more. Still no potters, unfortunately. Maybe another clerk. So we'll put that. Oh, that does mean that clerks are now over covered, and we're not going to get the bonus. Well, still, no, maybe not then. We'll take a monk, and we'll see how that goes. Right, so we do that. So we've done a monk. We probably could have just prayed, but never mind. So now we come to our smith, and we can craft with metal. We don't have anything on craft bench or supplements, that's fine. We can complete, and we get 2 smith actions now, because we get 1 smith here, and then 1 smith down there. So we get 2 completes. And unfortunately we can only complete the 1 paper, but that's fine, we'll place it out. Because now we get to activate our cloth cloak, and it says after you complete a work you may return it. If you do, so we're going to return it back to the bottom of the deck. We get to complete a metal work from our hand for free, so we don't have to worry about having extra metal. We just get to place this out, and I think, yeah, we'll put the chopsticks out. And in fact we may put the chopsticks out on this side, because now this smith task is now covered, so we get double smith task whenever that combos, so great. And we get a second smith task to do. Again, unfortunately we can't craft with metal, and now we can't complete anything, so it's just going to get prey. And we're done. So this comes back to our... oh, hang on a second. At night we may return a card from our hand. I think we're going to try and use this potter at some point to get a task going, and we may very well get this smith out at some point, or this gong out for an item. So we won't bother putting one back to get another card into waiting area. We'll simply end our turn, and now we get to get that item out into our area, into our hand. Okay, over to the Acolyte, which is going to... and cards can pile up very quickly if they're not being taken off. With more players you're probably going to get more cards taken off through various potter actions and the like, but sometimes cards can start accumulating in the floor, so you just clump them up as best you can. That's where the potters are, so there we go. So it's going to do, Acolyte's going to do a smith task first, which is a card from its hand, and it's going to complete it into the sails. So unfortunately, ideally it would like to do a clay item. There are no clay ones available, so it will simply choose the one which gives it the greatest points, which is this metal item. So that will get completed out on the right hand side there. Then it will come into a potter action, and similarly it will take a card from its hand and it will complete on the left hand side this time. So things are getting clumped together somewhat, but we'll try and keep them separate. So that is now a cloth item out here. So that is more points. It's going to have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7... no back orders of yet. Okay, so fair enough. And now it's done with its tasks. So that comes... oh, hang on a second. Instead of discarding our previous task to the floor, we may move it to our sails. Well, sure. We will put it to the sails, and hopefully we'll get something crafted metal-wise into there. So yeah, we'll do that. And then we need to pick a new one, and... well, now we have a metal sails out, we don't necessarily need to collect more materials, unless the straw comes into play. For smith actions we require one less support to complete a cloth or a clay work. Well, cloth only needs 2, so with this we could actually smith or craft cloth itself. Oh no, it's completing, I'm getting ahead of myself. No, that's not so useful then. Right, so instead we could use... well, yeah, let's collect some more materials and see if we can't do anything with that. And it's going to... well, we're going to collect with that potter as well. So maybe... no, I think a bunch of materials is not bad. We can always convert them to sales later for points. So sure, we'll do that. So we'll put the potter task down, and we'll do that. And then we come to the opponents first, so we're going to collect a material. We're not going to craft with clay. We don't have the items or the materials in the craft bench. So we'll collect, and I think we're going to collect this cloth here from the floor and put it into our craft bench. Then we come to do ours, and again we'll do exactly the same thing, and we can collect a material, or we could pray, but I think we'll get another cloth, like so. And now if we get a bunch of clerk tasks, and we certainly have the combo and power to do that, we can get all of these pushed through to our sails, and then they'll all be covered by this cloth cloak for lots of points. So sure, we'll do that. We are done. over to the AI, who is going to put that out, and a new one up. So it's running out of materials, or it's running out of cards here, so it does our action first, but it can't actually do anything. There's no cards for it to take from its hand and place into and place out into its areas, so it will simply do a prey. And then again it would come to its own, and it couldn't do it even if it wanted to, but it's a duplicate, so it still can't do it, so it would just do it on the prey and fill up its hand. So then 2 cards out into its hand for next turn, which is fine, up to us. Do we want to put that into the sails, or do we want to get it out onto the floor to be a clay? Well, there's already a clay there, but more clay might not be the worst thing in the world, so I think we'll just put it out on, and we won't necessarily put it into the sails. We don't have anything to take advantage of clay sails for the time being, so we'll skip that bit. And we need a new task, and I think whichever one it's going to be basically a prey at this point, because we don't have any tailors, unfortunately, to refill our hand, so there's not much else we can do in order to get cards out. So we'll put out a monk and we'll just pray with it. We come to opponent's potter, and we could collect a material. Well, it might be worth getting a paper material, and then that will be there, and then when it gets shifted around to sails, then that will be an extra point at the end of the game, because it'll be certainly covered with all these paper items we've crafted. So fine, we'll do that. We come to ours and we'll just pray. I suppose we could have prayed twice with the potter as well, but no, that's fine. And the monk is has a helper with it, so we can do a second action and it will be a second pray. So that's fine. So 2 cards, we're finished. We don't want to return a card from our hand, so we'll leave that, and we'll just put these into our hand. Oh, there's a tailor, so that'll be probably a task we do next turn for big points. Sorry, for large amounts of cards coming in. So over to the Acolyte. I'm just going to flip one out, and one comes in, so there's a tailor task for it. So it's going to do a monk first, and it will take a card from its hand and it will place it into its helpers, and it definitely wants to take this cloth card here, because mirroring the other side, it's going to be covered by this cloth puppet for extra points, so that's fine. Then it will come to its task, and for tailors, the Acolyte just gets 2 cards into its waiting area, and then turn over. So these will now flip over into its hand. Okay, so for us, we have, I did say tailor, didn't I, to get us a bunch of cards, but we're going to be getting a tailor with this action, so not necessarily then. What would we like to do instead? We could use it to craft with cloth, because we now have cloth in the craft bench, but unfortunately we have no more cloth in our hand once we use this for the tailor action to then use, so that's a bit of a shame. We could, let's see, if we use the smith and we can complete any work. Now then, am I reading this correctly? For smith actions we require 1 less support to complete a cloth or a clay work. So yes, we could actually get this cloth out, or this tapestry out, sorry, if we use the smith. And we could do a bunch of praise. Yeah, that's a good idea, we'll do that. So, opponent task first, we're going to refill our hand. So we've got 2 in our hand, and then we need another 3 into our waiting area, and that brings us up to the limit of 5. Great. Then we can do a smith task, our own smith task. So we can craft with metal, no. We could pray, not worth it right now, we'll do that in a second. Complete any work. So we're going to take this cloth tapestry, and normally if we're completing it we would have to show another cloth in our hand to bring us up to the value of 2, but as per the paper straw we can simply put it straight out into our area because we do it for 1 less. So that's great. Oh, and that gives us more points for everything here, so sure, we'll do that. Then we're going to combo Smith tasks, so we have a helper here, which is going to be another Smith task, and that's just going to be a prey. And then it's covered by this one, so that's going to be another Smith task, which is going to be another prey. So great. And if we're lucky, we'll get a bunch of, or at least one clerk we can use to get all this stuff over into sales. No. Okay, well, no clerks whatsoever. I think we'll probably use them all up in the game, maybe. So hopefully the Acolyte will be forthcoming and give us a clerk task when it does its task. So that is out. And yes. Excellent. Very fortunate. Thank you kindly. So it's going to do Smith first, and it's going to take an item from its area, or hand, sorry, and place it into its areas on the right hand side here. And it is going to be, well, it doesn't have a preference for any of these because it's not trying to cover any sales, so it's simply going to be the one with the most value, which is this coin here. So that will just go. Can we, that's better. We'll put those together like so. Okay. Then it comes around, it does the clerk, so it's going to take an item and it's going to put it into sales, and it's not worried about overcovering. So again, it's the one which has the most value, and they're both equally at 2. So it's going to be alphabetical order from poem is tower. So that will then just go into like so. There we go. Okay, really racking up the. That's going to be a lot of back orders potentially. Okay. And then it's done with its turn. No cards from waiting area into hand, so over to us. We do have to discard 1, unfortunately. And it can be probably one of these potters we have lying around. Let's see, can we end the game sooner rather than later? I think we're probably just about ahead without doing the math. So if we can end it quickly rather than letting the AI get some more points, that would be beneficial. We're going to do a bunch of clerks, which is going to sell a bunch of stuff. That's fine. Okay, so if we do this, get one of these out, yeah. So in that case then it doesn't really matter which one we get rid of. We'll probably get rid of this pillar, so that can be returned to bring us down to the limit of 5. And then this Smith metal can go out, and we'll bring in the Smith here for our task there. So on to actions, and we're going to get to sell a bunch of material, and we can do one with this clerk task here, and then we've got a helper here, and it's covered over here, so that's 3 in total. So we can shift all of this lot straight into sales, which is precisely what we're going to do. And that will all be covered, and that is brilliant. Perils of trying to do this one-handed. There we go. Good. So that's that done. Then we come on to hours, and it's going to be completing a work, and we can pick one of these clay items, and we have the item itself and 2 extra clay, so that is the total of 3 we need to complete anything straight from our hand. And we can pick that would be points, I believe, at the end of the game. We don't have too many helpers, unfortunately, but even so, nope. No. Oh, we return this and end the game anyway. No, we'll craft this. Oh, complete it, sorry. So that is completed straight out, and now we come immediately to the end of the game. So we have 5 works in our right-hand area here. It doesn't matter how many other comboing tasks we have left to go, or if we were done this earlier with someone else's task and we still had our own left to go. Nope, doesn't matter. Game ends straight away right now. And then we come to final scoring. So then, the AI scores, the Acolyte scores slightly differently. We score exactly the same as a normal game. So for the AI, and I'll try and remember points here. So it's going to get basically the right-hand side scores as normal, the left-hand side is mirrored, and then it does back orders. So it will get 6 points from its metalworks, and then a point from the paper, which is covering a paper sale here, so it's a point there. So that is a total of 8. Then it has the cloth over here. Excuse me. So it has a cloth over here for a further 2, which I said was 6, 8, 10, and then it's covering. Sorry, hang on a second. It's covering this cloth over here, so it's mirroring the other side basically. So that's a further 2 points. So it's going to be 6, 7, 8, 10, 12. And then it checks back orders. So back orders are slightly fiddly if you're not quite sure how they work. But basically you look at the sales for each person. Whoever has the most sale of a particular material, whether it's covered or overcovered or whatever, then takes into account cards in their hand and tallies up points for that. So the only card left in the Acolyte's hand is the cloth. So if it had the most cloth sales, it would get to score that cloth card for points as well. It actually has the most in clay, so and we're tied on paper, which is fair enough. So paper, we've got 1 each, so for a tie it doesn't matter, no one gets anything. For stone, it's ahead on stone, but unfortunately it has no stoneworks to score as back orders. For cloth, we are ahead on cloth, so we'll get to score those back orders when we get to our scoring. We're ahead on metal, and the AI is ahead on clay, but as I said, it's got no clay there to score. So it could have scored several as back orders, but there's nothing actually in its hand to score. So it's simply going to get the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 there. And that is fine. Okay, so 12 for the AI. Then we come to us, and I think we've done a slightly better showing. So we are going to get on the face of it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13. This paper is adequately covered by these paper items, that's another point. These cloth could have been covered by just one of these cloth works, because they can complete up to the value of the number on them, or they can cover, sorry. So either one of these cloth on their own could have covered these 2 cloth sales, so that's a further 4 points. The metal is not covered, so that's no points there. And unlike the Acolyte, we don't bother with stuff on this side, that's been used already for helpers. So we have, what was it again, 2, 4, 6, 9, 10, 13. The cloth is covered for 14. So the paper is covered for 14. The 2 cloths were covered for a total of 18. And as for back orders, we had the most of metal and the most of cloth, and we were tied on paper, so that doesn't count. So metal, we don't have any in our hand. Cloth, we do have 1 cloth, so that's a further 2 points. For I think a total of 20 against the AI's 12, I believe it was. So yeah, okay, great. So 20 to 12. Oh, and 1 point for each work in this wing, so that's another 5, so that'd be 25. Yeah, it's a bit of a blowout, unfortunately, for the Acolyte. But, oh, never mind. It can vary. I mean, it depends entirely on what the Acolyte gets. I think it was partway through starved with cards in its hand, otherwise it would be doing a lot more getting items out. And it can certainly, if it gets the right tasks out, it can rack up very quickly cards on this side and then end the game before you even had a chance to get anything going on your side whatsoever. So, a bit of swings and roundabouts, but especially for yourself, it does actually mirror rather well how you go up against other players, because essentially all you're doing, unless they steal stuff from the floor, and there are certain cards that when you play out give you abilities to affect other people, but essentially you're mainly going to be using other people for their tasks and trying to combo them with your own tasks and helpers you have. So it does do that very well. It certainly puts out a random amount of tasks, and you might get lucky with the combos off them. And it does vary the length slightly, so as I said, it could run away with it very quickly if you're not keeping on track of it. So yeah, it's quite a good variant. Like I said, to be honest, the best way of trying to get your head around this game is to just go through it. Basically, and the variant is very good for this because all you have to worry about really is your own side. There's not too much in the way of bookkeeping for the Acolyte. So take your turn reference cards, follow them religiously. Even if you don't particularly understand what you're doing, just put stuff in the various areas and see how it all clicks together. And sooner or later you're going to get the hang of it and how stuff flows and what needs to go where and all the planning you need to take into account. So yeah, best way to play the game is to literally just play it really and try and muddle through as best you can. But yeah, that was a solo game of Mottainai. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.